Hi, I am Cornelius Fichtner. I am the lead instructor of the Agile PrepCast. Thanks for your interest and for taking a look at this free lesson. I hope that it will help you on your road to becoming PMI-ACP certified. The complete Agile PrepCast has dozens of lessons like this one that make studying for your PMI-ACP as easy as pressing play. You can find all the details at pm-prepcast.com/agile. And now, let's start the lesson.
Welcome to the Agile PrepCast, helping you prepare for the PMI-ACP exam. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the next lesson of the Agile PrepCast, your beacon lighting the way to PMI-ACP success. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. In this lesson, we continue our discussion of the different Agile implementation methods by reviewing Scrum. Scrum is by far the most popular method used today by the world's Agile project development teams, and is also one of the most rigid in terms of recommended practices and procedures. At the heart of Scrum is the Agile iterative cycle called the sprint, which is supported by different types of project team roles, meetings called events, and documentation and tools called artifacts. Scrum is embraced by most organizations that not only want to implement Agile principles quickly on their projects, but are also interested in implementing Agile principles across their entire organization. So, in this lesson, we will provide insight into the difference between Scrum and Agile and also give you an overview here. Explain the key roles and responsibilities crucial to projects implementing Scrum. Outline the different Agile strategic planning meetings that set the stage for Scrum, discuss the various events conducted during each sprint in Scrum, review the different types of Scrum artifacts, and see when to use Scrum over other Agile software development methods. This lesson has 6 parts. In part 1, we will provide you with the insight into the differences between Scrum and Agile, because they are indeed quite different. This is important to understand so that when you are part of a Scrum team and your organization's upper management and other employees ask you what that means, or indeed if you get a PMI-ACP question about this, you will be able to accurately explain the differences. In part 2, we will look at an overview of the roles that are used in Scrum. Then in part 3, we will jump into the details of these roles. In part 4, we will review the Agile strategic meetings that are usually used during a Scrum project, and then we'll jump into the specific Scrum sprint events. And now you're probably wondering, wait a second, I've seen fingers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pop up here, but now we have the 6th of these parts. How on earth are we going to show 6 fingers here on the 6th item? Well, this is where Photoshop and Frankenstein come into play. Here is our 6-fingered Frankenstein hand for the 6th of our 6 parts. And in part 6, with the Frankenstein hand, we are going to be reviewing the artifacts. So we are in part 1 out of these 6 parts, which means we're going to jump into a definition of Scrum and Agile. But before we can talk intelligibly about Agile and Scrum, we will need to determine what these two terms mean in a more general sense. And then we must also determine what they mean when they are pertaining to project management and specifically to software development. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines Agile as marked by a ready ability to move with quick, easy grace, for example, an agile dancer, and also having a quick, resourceful, and adaptable character, for example, an agile mind. So we immediately see that when you talk about being agile in a general sense, it refers to being readily available to make quick and graceful movements while also being resourceful and adaptable. Although no one person or group has established a widely accepted definition of Agile project management, the following describes how we here on the Agile PrepCast see it. Agile project management is an iterative project management philosophy for determining requirements for engineering and information technology development projects. It is implemented in order to execute these projects in a highly flexible and interactive manner. Agile project management is also customer value driven, and it requires empowered individuals from all project teams. Lastly, Agile project management relies on constant business process improvement, stakeholder input, and requirements flexibility to ensure project success. It's also important to note that although Agile project management shares its roots with Agile software development, the Agile project management philosophy can be applied to more than just software development and information technology projects. Today, the Agile project management philosophy is being used in industries as diverse as construction, government, healthcare, manufacturing, and even the development of the Agile PrepCast that you are watching right now. On the previous slide, we answered the question, what is Agile project management? Now we answer the question, what is Agile software development? According to Wikipedia, Agile software development is a group of software development methods based on iterative and incremental development, where requirements and solutions evolve through collaboration between self-organizing, cross-functional teams. It promotes adaptive planning, evolutionary development and delivery, a time-boxed iterative approach, and encourages rapid and flexible response to change. It is a conceptual framework that promotes foreseen interactions throughout the development cycle. The Agile Manifesto introduced the term in 2001. And then, of course, there is Scrum, defined by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary as a rugby play in which the forwards of each side come together in a tight formation to struggle and gain possession of the ball using their feet when it is tossed among them. In plain language, it is a term used in rugby referring to the manner of restarting the game after a minor penalty or infraction. Okay, but why use the word Scrum in Agile project software development at all? Well, it was actually used as a metaphor for people to understand the basic principles behind Scrum. While we will review these principles in detail later in this lesson, it's important right now just to understand where the term originated. Scrum was first coined with respect to Agile in the January-February 1986 Harvard Business Review article, The New Product Development Game, by Takeuchi and Nonaka, where they compared the high-performing cross-functional teams that they were using on their new method of software development to the Scrum formation used in rugby. In the mid-1990s, Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber used this methodology on their Agile development projects and referred to this method using the single word Scrum. Soon after that, the Scrum Software Development Methodology and the Scrum Alliance were born, and the rest, as they say, is history. Before we begin our in-depth discovery of what Scrum is all about, we must first understand how Scrum fits within Agile software development. Agile began as a software development conceptual framework to aid streamlining projects and outlines general guidelines that you can use to execute your projects. However, Agile software development encompasses many different methods, such as extreme programming, XP, test-driven development, TDD, lean software development, and of course, Scrum. Basically, Agile software development outlines what to do on your projects, and the methods like Scrum describe how to do it on your projects. In general, Scrum can be characterized as an iterative and incremental Agile software development method that is open to change. It is used to manage software projects and/or products or application development projects. It is adaptive rather than predictive. It is people-oriented, not process-oriented, focuses on the skills of the development team, and is centered around small iterations. Scrum is a highly structured but adaptable method to use on complex projects. It is based on an empirical approach that includes observation and experience to perform the incremental development of products. The authority to make critical decisions are under the control of the development team. Compared to other Agile methods, Scrum presents clear rules and guidelines within its framework that must be followed to ensure project success. Very well then, now that we have seen an overview of what we mean by Agile project management, Agile software development, and Scrum, it's important to ensure that we understand the differences between them when you encounter them on projects. So here is an important overview. Agile project management is an iterative project management philosophy used to determine development requirements and to execute projects in a highly flexible and interactive manner. Agile software development is a conceptual framework of iteratively and incrementally based software development methods that uses collaborative, self-organizing cross-functional teams and that encourages rapid and flexible response to change. And lastly, Scrum. Scrum is an iterative and incremental Agile software development method used for managing software projects, product, and other application development projects. As you are becoming more and more involved with Agile projects, you will probably sometimes wonder, well, should we use Scrum or should we better use the Waterfall approach here? While there are pros and cons to both of these approaches, the real answer is, well, it really depends. Scrum is often compared to the Waterfall approach, which emphasizes upfront project planning and scheduling of activities, followed by executing, monitoring, and controlling, and finally closing the project. Both approaches require careful planning, followed by execution, monitoring, and controlling, but the details of how these steps are performed are vastly different. Let's review specifically when to use Scrum and when to use the Waterfall approach. All right, let's take a look here. On the left we have Scrum, on the right we have Waterfall. So use Scrum when your scope is not clearly defined, since you haven't done this type of work before. But you want to use the Waterfall approach when the scope is clearly defined, since you have done this type of work previously in other projects. Then you should also use Scrum when the requirements change frequently, and these changes are part of your philosophy, part of your approach. You welcome these changes. However, use Waterfall when requirements are well defined up front and not expected to change, or at least not expected to change much. Also use Scrum when all activities are not really all that well known ahead of time, and you can't really reliably estimate them. However, Waterfall can be used much better if all activities are known ahead of time. You know exactly what you're going to do, and you can reliably estimate how much time it's going to take you and how much it is going to cost you. Scrum, again, is used because it's an iterative process. You perform multiple iterations of each process within each cycle on the project, whereas the Waterfall approach, the process is linear. You perform one iteration of each process phase and only one cycle of the project. And lastly, do use Scrum when success is measured by the value that you deliver to the customer, and use Waterfall when success is really measured by achieving the planned initial scope and budget. So generally speaking, Scrum is a better method to be used on more complex projects, and also for those projects where it is difficult to define specific requirements and estimates at the beginning of the project. If the project is not very complex and you know the specific requirements up front and you can provide accurate estimates, well, you are probably better off using the Waterfall method for your project. The 3 pillars of Scrum is a central concept that is used in the theory and framework of Scrum. Scrum is built on the principles of visibility, inspection, and adaptation, and all of these 3 refer to both the Scrum processes and the Scrum results. So here we have the 3 pillars at the bottom, and the Scrum processes and the Scrum results at the top, supported by these 3 pillars. So let's take a look at each of these 3 pillars from left to right, starting with visibility, which refers to the fact that each Scrum team member's work and progress should be transparent to all interested stakeholders. An example is the posting of the burn down chart in a common area for all to see the progress of the team members and the project at a moment's glance. So visibility, very big, because we always want to know where are we on our project. Next, we have the middle pillar here, inspection. That refers to the ongoing daily observations and interactions of the team in completing the work as they move through the project. An example is the daily Scrum event, when all team members review their realized or potential roadblocks. And the last pillar on the right, adaptation. This refers to being constantly flexible and welcoming changes during a Scrum project, including constant business process improvement. An example is the sprint retrospective event, where lessons learned are reviewed after every sprint, and specific plans of action are implemented during the next sprint to prevent these issues from occurring again on the project. Simply put, the 3 parts, the 3 pillars of this central Scrum concept indicate that the feature or functionality and the way in which it is developed should be highly visible, should be constantly inspected, and it should be frequently adapted. Do you remember me earlier saying that Scrum projects contain a more rigid structure than other Agile projects? Well, this is what we want to jump into here right now, give you a better understanding of what we mean by this rigidity, by the structural aspects, and why it is more rigid. And for this, we're doing an overview, but don't worry, we're going to jump into each of these areas in more detail in the upcoming parts. So, on Scrum projects, the Scrum team members have the ability to adapt to changing conditions. And in addition, distractions that could prevent progress
on the project are also minimized. And this increased structure is achieved by employing the following structural aspects, and that's kind of why we've used these bricks in the background here. So the aspects we're going to now be talking about, these are the bricks in the wall that make up Scrum. First of all, we have well-defined roles. Scrum roles are very specific. For example, a product owner can never be a Scrum Master and vice versa. Combining these roles can cause confusion and conflict of priorities. There is an increased reliance on time boxes. A time box is an imposed time constraint on events and tasks that force important prioritization decisions and pressure the team to complete activities. The time period cannot be exceeded, no matter how much work still remains. An example is imposing a 15-minute maximum time box on your daily Scrum meeting. Next, we have team size restrictions. Scrum teams should consist of at least 5 members, but no more than 9 members. Teams with fewer than 5 members may have difficulty completing all of the tasks in the sprint backlog on time. Teams with more than 9 members would require additional communication and integration activities that take the team's focus away from completing project tasks. And then we have additional rules for team events. And some examples include that the sprint planning events, that they only include or involve the product owner, Scrum Master, and development team members, and no other stakeholders are included, or that the daily Scrum is held at the same time in the same location every day. And then there are also strict enforcement of rules and guidelines. And when we talk about strict enforcement, we mean things that only development team members are allowed to change the sprint backlog based on their review of the progress and understanding of the tasks in progress, or that the burn down charts are updated each day after the daily Scrum. This happens every day, always after the daily Scrum, and we enforce that particular rule. The specific Scrum structure may vary from project to project, but it is important that the rules and guidelines governing Scrum teams are created early in the project and are agreed upon based on the consensus of the team. Now that we understand the objectives of Scrum at a high level, it's time to jump deeper into how Scrum is actually structured in order to use its principles as effectively as possible on our projects. And in order to do that, here is a diagram representing an overview of the Scrum framework, and we will be referring back to this one here quite often as part of this lesson. This diagram, by the way, was adapted from the book Agile Software Development with Scrum by Ken Schwaber and Mike Beadle. So what do we see here? On the left side, the blue boxes there, that's your product backlog. Contains all the user stories that you eventually want to develop for your product. Out of that, you take a piece of it, which goes into your sprint backlog, a subset of the complete product backlog. That is expanded by the team into tasks. So in order to develop the sprint backlog, these are all the tasks that we have to do. Then you take up to 30 days of your sprint. There, the big circle that we see. Every 24 hours, we meet for a daily Scrum, and at the end of the 30 days, we will have a potentially shippable product increment. So that's the quick view here. But in order to explain exactly how all of this fits together, we are going to take a look at the components that surround this diagram. And we have several components that we need to look into, and once we are done looking at all of these components, you will understand each and every detail of this diagram here. Okay, so the first components, we have roles, and these are specific roles that need to be filled for each Scrum team. We have the product owner, who is the voice of the customer. We have a Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is the Agile and Scrum coach to the rest of the team. And we have the development team, and that is anyone who is involved in any aspect of the development, not just developers, so not just software developers. So even if you are a designer on a Scrum team, you are called a developer. Okay, next we have meetings and events. And here we differentiate between strategic meetings that come from Agile and events that are defined by Scrum. The Agile strategic meetings, they are used by many Agile methods, including Scrum, and they are crucial to laying the foundations for Scrum events and artifact. Those are the two that are in brackets here. So we have the strategy meeting to develop the product vision statement and an initial product roadmap. Then we have a release planning meeting in which we develop a release plan, if necessary, based on the product roadmap. And then we move into the Scrum Sprint events. These are the specific Scrum meetings, gatherings, events that should be scheduled during each iterative cycle. Okay, so we have the sprint planning to plan what goes into the sprint. We have the sprint review to demonstrate the completed functionality at the end of the sprint, obviously. We have the sprint retrospective also at the end to determine what went right, what went wrong, and how do we fix what went wrong. And we have the daily Scrum, which is used to update the Scrum team on what I did since our last meeting, what I will do by our next daily Scrum meeting, and what, if any, roadblocks I have. And then the third component that we need to look at, artifacts. And again, you see two of these artifacts there are in brackets. So we have specific documents here, hard or soft copy, and tools that contain the project requirements and are used to document the project's progress. And those in brackets, again, they come from Agile in general, and the ones that are not in brackets, they are from Scrum. So we have the vision statement, a concise description of the goals of the project that helps the team remain focused on the crucial aspect of the project. The product roadmap, a visual timeline of major product features that supports the vision statement. The product backlog, the list of features and requirements in user story format for the project. The sprint backlog, list of features and requirements in task format for the sprint. And the burn down chart, a graphical depiction of progress on sprint tasks so that you know exactly where we are in our sprint and whether or not we are going to achieve the goal of the sprint that we had set out. All of these components must be working together in order to achieve project success using Scrum. So that was a high-level overview so that you understand what we're actually seeing here in this diagram. But this concludes part 1 of this lesson, and I will see you again in part 2 when we are going to start jumping into these components. In particular, we are going to be reviewing the different Scrum roles from a high level.